Hey everyone, welcome back to Trucker's Tales. It's good to have you riding along with me again. Today, I want to take you back a few years, to a run that started out as simple as they come, but ended up reminding me that you're never truly alone out here on the blacktop, even when it feels like you're the last man on Earth. The job was a load of high-grade Douglas fir lumber, stacked and strapped down tight on my flatbed. I was hauling it out of a mill in Portland, Oregon, bound for a big construction supplier in Denver, Colorado. It's a beautiful run, one of my favorites. You get to see the country change right before your eyes. My rig, a Peterbilt 379 I call Old Blue, was purring like a kitten. She was an older girl, but I knew every bolt and every wire on her. We were a team. The first day was a breeze. East on I-84, following the Columbia River Gorge. If you've never driven that stretch of road, you're missing out. The sheer cliffs, the waterfalls, the way the river shines in the morning sun, it almost makes you forget you're working. I pushed through Oregon, crossed the Snake River into Idaho, and settled in for the long, straight shot across the southern part of the state. It was standard procedure. Keep the coffee hot, the radio low, and your eyes on the horizon. The load was heavy, but Old Blue was handling it just fine. I was making good time, feeling confident. I figured I'd be in Denver with a day to spare. I had no idea the Rockies were waiting for me with a test I wasn't ready for. Leaving Idaho and crossing into Utah, you start to feel the change. The road begins to climb. Not aggressively at first, just a gradual, steady ascent that puts a little more strain on the engine. You can feel it in the pedal. The easy purr of the diesel deepens into a determined groan. I rolled through Salt Lake City and got onto I-80, heading east. This is where the real work begins. The Wasatch Mountains rise up like a wall in front of you. The air gets thinner, cleaner, and colder. The sky seems a deeper shade of blue. The sheer scale of the mountains does something to you. It makes you and your 80,000-pound rig feel like a tiny insect crawling across a giant's rock garden. You're hyper-aware of everything. Your engine temperature, your oil pressure, the sound of the turbo spooling up as it forces that thin mountain air into the cylinders. You respect the mountain. You have to. It doesn't care about your schedule or your deadline. I was deep in the heart of the range, winding through the passes. The scenery was breathtaking. Jagged peaks capped with snow even in late spring, deep green valleys stretching out below. But with that beauty comes a profound sense of isolation. The towns get smaller and farther apart. Cell service becomes a joke. It's just you, your truck, and the immense silent power of the wilderness. It was on one of these long, lonely stretches, miles from anywhere, that the symphony of my engine gained a new, unwelcome instrument. It started as a tick, a faint, metallic sound, almost like a stone caught in the tire treads. Tick, tick, tick. Rhythmic and just loud enough to cut through the engine's roar. I turned the radio down. Tick, tick, tick. It was definitely coming from under the hood. I'm not a certified mechanic, but after 1,000,000 miles on the road, you develop an ear for your engine. You know its happy sounds, its tired sounds, and its something is very wrong sounds. This was one of the latter. My heart sank. I eased off the accelerator, hoping the sound would go away. It didn't. In fact, it got worse. The tick became a clank, a hard, ugly sound that vibrated right through the floorboards into the soles of my boots. Clank, groaned, clank. It was the sound of metal hitting metal where it shouldn't. The engine temperature gauge started to creep up, past the normal mark and into the danger zone. I knew I had to stop. Pushing it now would mean turning a serious problem into a catastrophic one. On a narrow mountain two-lane with barely any shoulder, that's a terrifying prospect. I saw a small pull-off ahead, a gravel patch just big enough for my rig. I coasted in, the clanking getting louder and more violent until, with one final shuddering gasp, the engine died. And then, silence. A silence so complete and so sudden it was deafening. I was stranded. I sat there for a minute, just listening to the silence and the sound of my own heart hammering in my chest. I grabbed my flashlight, hopped out, and popped the hood. A cloud of steam and the bitter smell of hot oil and antifreeze hit me in the face. I couldn't see anything obviously broken, no thrown belts or disconnected hoses, but I knew enough to know this was internal. This was deep. This was bad. My cell phone confirmed what I already knew. No service. I tried the CB radio. Nothing but static. The sun was beginning to dip behind the peaks, and the temperature was dropping fast. The feeling of isolation I'd felt earlier was now a cold, heavy blanket of dread. I was a sitting duck on the side of a mountain. I scanned the horizon, desperate for any sign of civilization. And then I saw it. About 100 yards down the road, almost hidden by a pine tree, was a small, faded wooden sign. The paint was peeling, but I could just make out the words, Harmony Creek, 5 miles. 5 miles. It might as well have been 100. Walking 5 miles on a highway shoulder in steel-toed boots is nobody's idea of a good time, but it was my only option. I grabbed a bottle of water, locked up the cab, and started walking, leaving Old Blue sitting cold and broken behind me. The walk was brutal. The air was thin, my boots were heavy, and every logging truck that roared past felt like it was going to suck me under its wheels. After what felt like an eternity, the road curved, and I saw it. Harmony Creek wasn't so much a town as a handful of buildings clustered in a small valley. A gas station with old-fashioned pumps, a general store, a small diner, and a few houses. It looked like a place that time had forgotten. My eyes scanned for what I needed most, and there it was, across the street from the diner. A low brick building with large bay doors and a hand-painted sign that read, Harmony Creek Auto and Diesel Repair. Hope, sharp and sudden, shot through me. I pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air was thick with the familiar, comforting smell of grease, diesel, and hot metal. The place was old school. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, engine blocks sat on stands, and in the center of the bay, an old man with a shock of white hair and oil-stained coveralls was bent over the engine of a pickup truck. He didn't look up right away. I cleared my throat. "Excuse me?" I said. He slowly straightened up, wiped his hands on a red rag, and looked at me with a skeptical eye. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Explain my situation. The breakdown, the sound, the location of my rig. The old mechanic, who introduced himself as Earl, just nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "What kind of engine?" he asked. "Detroit Series 60, I told him. A flicker of something. Interest, recognition crossed his face. "All right," he said. "Cody, grab the tow rig." A younger man, maybe in his early 20s, emerged from a back room. The two of them drove me back to my truck in their massive, ancient tow truck. Earl didn't say a word on the ride. When we got to Old Blue, he had me turn the key. The engine turned, but wouldn't catch, and it made that awful clanking sound one last time. Earl listened, his head cocked to the side like a doctor listening to a patient's heart. "Yep," he said, more to himself than to me. "Lifter collapsed, dropped a valve." He said it with such certainty it was chilling. Getting my rig towed into their small shop was a masterclass in skill. They maneuvered it into the bay with inches to spare. For the next few hours, I watched them work, and my skepticism slowly turned into awe. This wasn't a modern shop where they just plug in a computer and replace a module. This was craftsmanship. Earl and Cody moved around that engine with a quiet, practiced efficiency. They pulled the valve cover, and sure enough, there it was, a broken valve stem and a damaged lifter. It was a mess. "Gonna be hard to find a part for this old girl out here," I said, my heart sinking again. Earl just grunted, walked to a towering wall of dusty parts bins, and after a minute of searching, pulled out a small, greasy box. He blew the dust off it and handed it to me. It was the exact part I needed. "Been sitting on that for 15 years, he said with a hint of smile. "Knew it'd come in handy someday." They had Old Blue put back together by midnight. When Earl turned the key, the engine fired up instantly. The roar was back, but it was different. It was smooth, powerful, and clean. The ugly clank was gone, replaced by the healthy, rhythmic hum I knew and loved. It sounded better than it had in years. I walked over to the makeshift office to settle up, bracing myself for a bill that would cripple me. A tow in the mountains, emergency after-hours labor, a rare part. I was expecting a number with a lot of zeros. Earl scribbled on a pad for a moment and turned it around. The price was so low I thought it was a mistake. It was fair. It was more than fair. "Earl, this can't be right," I said. He just shrugged. "That's the price of the part, plus a bit for our time. We ain't getting rich out here, son. We just fix trucks. A man's got to be able to rely on his rig." I paid him, my hand shaking slightly with relief and gratitude. As I climbed back into the cab of my truck, I tried to thank him properly, but the words felt small. He just gave me a nod. "Drive safe. The mountain's got a long memory." I pulled out of Harmony Creek and back onto the dark highway, the purr of my engine a reassuring companion. I looked at the little town in my rearview mirror until its lights disappeared. It wasn't just a repair shop. It was a pocket of integrity, a place where pride and skill meant more than a quick buck. They didn't just fix my truck, they restored a little bit of my faith. So that's it for this one, folks. A reminder that sometimes when you're broken down in the middle of nowhere, you find the best of what this country has to offer. Until next time, keep the shiny side up and the greasy side down. I'll catch you on the next run.